Has anyone ever been to a wedding where someone actually objected? And if so, how did that go? Groom found out that bride was cheating 2 days before the wedding day. He spilled the beans while exchanging the vows. It was frosted. My uncle was getting married. It's all small, just a handful of family and a minister. I was videotaping. My grandmother was not into it at all. With each line spoken by the minister, she had a cutting, sarcastic response. I could not believe it. It was so unlike her. When that part came up, she said, "I object." But does it really matter? They are going to do it anyway. The minister just ignored her and proceeded business as usual. They were divorced within a year. Wish I had a copy. I had a friend who was a minister, and the subject came up if he asked the question during ceremonies he officiated. He laughed and said, "No way." He basically tells the couple not to include it because it only invites a moment of anxiety at best, misery at worst. His best story, and one of the reasons he stopped including the question, was a couple where the lead up to the wedding, the couple was obviously in love. The bride-to-be was very smiley and happy. Day of the wedding, she's stone-faced. He knows something is up because he's never seen her like this, and he asks if she is okay. "I'm fine." Right before the service, he asks again. "I'm fine." I was at one where the groom thanked the bride's ex for dying as his loss was my gain. The bride reaches over, grabs the maid, and I wasn't one for going back. Shoves her into the bride's spot and says, "You're screwing him. You married him." Of his and then stormed out of the church. And that it were the taste of people. A friend of mine has a band that plays lots of weddings and other parties. They were hired for a birthday party that turned out to be a surprise wedding. The guy surprised his GF with a proposal and wanted to have a wedding ceremony then and there. And she said no and left. My auntie's fiance was already married, or lady stood up waving marriage cert. So wedding didn't go ahead. The reception was on a longboat, so we still went to that. The fiance went back to home country to sort it out and never came back. Not quite the question as asked, but too funny to not share. Priest, any objections? Lets out the hardest, loudest, most complex sounding sneeze I've ever heard in my life, completely with involuntarily saying, "Oh, mother of the bride hammered on champagne. For fuck's sake, Cherry." It took a good 5 minutes. I went to a wedding where everyone to regain their composure. The best man was replaced a week before because he banged the bride. But the wedding still went ahead just with a different best man. They are divorced now. This was in America, and the wedding was in a Buddhist temple. And parents of the groom stood up and objected because they didn't believe the bride was of the same class. They spoke in another language, so most of the English-speaking guests didn't know they were objecting. My husband was the best man, and those closest to the couple knew this might happen. The Buddhist priest said he would handle it if the parents tried anything. After the parents spoke for a while, the priest said to the groom, "You've heard what your parents had to say. What do you want to do?" The groom replied, "I want to marry my bride." So the priest asked the parents to leave. At this point, the rest of the guests are cluing in that this was not a nice part of the ceremony, that the parents were actually objecting, and how could you do that? And even though the groom was not happy, that was 30 years ago. A couple is still married. They have two beautiful, successful children. After the groom's mom passed away, the groom's father came around and was involved in their lives until he died. A woman in her 20s at the time objected to her mom marrying my uncle. And so she started yelling, "Mom, don't marry him during the ceremony." The ceremony proceeded, and some family on the mom's side led the daughter away to quit interrupting. I don't blame her. My uncle was a lying, lazy bastard. The marriage didn't last. One of my cousins is married to literally one of the kindest and coolest dudes I have ever met. Before the wedding, her little sister was saying how she's marrying my best friend. At the wedding, when the priest dude asks if anyone objects, the room is dead quiet and all you hear is a little girlish whisper. It was honestly really adorable, and we all laughed. At his rehearsal dinner, a co-worker's mother toast included that his soon-to-be wife was a damn dirty whore who wasn't good enough for her son. You know, folks not happy. And then second, it was absolutely critis. And it wasn't for that reason. And it didn't see the whole thing. At wedding, which I attended his mom, started to say something at the speak now part, but was silenced by her daughter. Mom left and didn't see the rest of the ceremony. Everything about that poor guy was drama. Went to a wedding where they skipped that part because the bride's adult daughter was planning to object. I don't know if it's a UK thing or even just a one specific church thing, but I was told by the priest in a rehearsal that if someone objects even as a joke, the priest is required to pause the ceremony and talk to the objector alone to discuss their concerns and decide if they have a valid objection. Like, it's not a fun, jokey moment. It's a real legal part of the ceremony. He also said it used to be custom that if you raised an invalid objection, you then had to pay for the wedding. Not a wedding, but at a funeral, someone objected the death. At my uncle's funeral, his ex-wife and a local church leader trying to raise him from the dead. We were all sitting there like normal people at a normal funeral, and she walks up to the casket and starts yelling, "James Lester, raise up." I didn't know she was there, or I would have prepared myself for shenanigans. Also, I didn't know my uncle's middle name was Lester, so please imagine the confusion. And so she and the cult leader are literally yelling at my uncle's body. Not surprisingly, my uncle refused to resurrect himself. They were escorted out. I've actually never told this story because it makes my family look insane. Yes, at my cousin's, the bride's ex showed up, and when he stood up to object, my uncles grabbed him and bum-rushed him out of the church and gave him a tune-up in the parking lot. If you could make your talk for a Catholic wedding, of course. I went to a Catholic wedding where when the priest asked this question, one of the groomsmen did a very loud, long throat clearing, which got everyone laughing. Everyone except for the bride's elderly Italian grandmother, who marched out of her seat and angrily hit the groomsman with her handbag and shouted at him in Italian. My mother passed away about 15 years ago, and I 5 years later, my dad married my now stepmother. It was an outdoor wedding on a beautiful sunny day, and during the spot where they usually ask if anyone objects, a big gust of wind came out of nowhere and knocked over some tables. Afterward, multiple people came to tell me that wind gust was my mother objecting, which I like to believe was true.